Hello and welcome to a new series for How to Paint. Today we're looking at the ODST expansion for Halo Flashpoint. I was a big fan of Halo back in the day, and ODST is actually one of my favorites of the franchise. So, without further ado, grab your paints and get set for a combat drop. I'm going to be painting Gunnery Sergeant Buck and Captain Dare. Now these are resin models that come in the Feet First into Hell expansion. Once they're assembled, I've just sprayed them in a matte black primer, and you can use a spray can for this like I did. Next, I'm going to be hitting them with some neutral grey from roughly 45 degrees. I just want to highlight some of those more detailed sections on the armour itself. Again, you could use a spray can. I'm using an airbrush for this. Once that's dry, I've decided to start just gently dry brushing some of the details. For this, I'm using a rainy grey. This is a warmer grey. And I'm using a makeup brush. I want that nice soft dry brushing. I don't want to get it too chalky or too gritty. So I'm just going over the model and catching some of those areas of the details. I've decided to blend the whole model together now with a black wash. You could of course use a non-oil if you're using Citadel paints, but I just wanted to uniformly reintroduce those shadows back into the dry brushing. While this is drying, I'm going to be starting with the bases. This is a Balor brown, and I'm highlighting some of the dusty areas on the base. These are sculpted in details, but you could of course add your own texture paint if you wanted to. And to help recreate those streets of New Mombasa, we're going to be using Sons of Horus green on all of the metallic sections on the base. In the game, ODST does a great job of setting this dark, moody city at night, and I'm trying to recreate that with some of these bluer tones mixed with the complementary yellows. I'm going to be starting off with Dare's armor, and for that I'm using Highlord blue contrast paint. This is going to be my darkest color on the model, but it helps me to kind of sketch out where those colors are going to be. She has a few sections of armor that are different colors, different blues, so I'm just using this as kind of a base tone and a roadmap of where I'm going to be adding my armor sections in that blue color. And then I'm using that same Highlord blue for the iconic Recon helmet. Once that's dry, I now have a guide for my next highlight color. For this, I'm using Macragge blue, and I'm starting to just gently layer in on the upturned areas those basic highlights. When it comes to the section on the thighs and the gauntlets, they actually have like an urban camo type pattern on it. So to represent this on the Mini, I'm actually just using kind of a blob paint approach, and I'm just adding these random patches of that Macragge blue. The next highlight color is going to be introducing some rust grey into that Macragge blue. I'm mixing the two together. And for this, I'm starting to go over some of that Macragge blue and really reinforce the saturated blue color. There's a lot of layers going on here, and really, because these are two hero miniatures, I decided just to spend a little bit more time and care than I would, say, the regular ODST miniatures. Once again, when it comes to the gauntlets and the thighs, I'm still doing that kind of blob amorphous shape approach using this Macragge blue and rust grey mix, and it really helps to sell the idea that this is a camo pattern. Next, this is just pure rust grey straight out of the pot, and I'm starting to get smaller and smaller in my highlights and a little bit more strategic on where I want that bright blue color. For example, here on the main chest armor, I really want to give that a punch, so that's mostly rust grey. But the shoulder straps, they get brighter towards the top of the shoulders there. Along the helmet, I'm trying to keep my highlights just to the top part of those raised sections. And for places like the backpack, anything with a hard edge like this, I can just use the edge of my brush just to create that highlight line. Once again, for those camo patterns, I'm adding more of these blobs. I find that the more layers you add, the more convincing of a camo pattern it becomes. For the last layer of highlights, I'm going to be introducing a little bit of bold titanium white into that rust grey, and I'm really reserving this just for edge highlights. I'm just carefully picking out some of those edges on the armor plates and just kind of reinforcing where I want the brightest point on the armor to be. And again, this is probably just a little bit too much layering for your regular rank and file, but because these are hero miniatures, I just wanted to go that extra step. I'm carefully using a small amount of Elven gold to highlight the visor on the helmet. A lot of the other details on the helmet are probably just too small to recreate, but I just wanted to get this tiny little white dot that's in the middle of that raised section. On the undersuit, I'm adding some very, very basic grayscale highlights. This is starting off with that neutral grey and then just slowly introducing a couple of layers of white there. And then with that bright grey colour, I'm just picking out a couple of the belt buckles and carabiners and hooks and things like that. For the pistol, I'm just giving this a quick coat of black Templar contrast paint. You could of course use an Army Painter black contrast paint as well if you wanted to. This just helps to break up all those greys and kind of define it as something different. For the fingers, I'm starting off with a base coat of Bugman's Glow. This is kind of my go-to flesh recipe. You could also, if you really wanted to save some time here, you could use a white undercoat followed by a contrast paint. I mixed in some basic flesh as my next highlight. And then I followed that up with a final highlight of deck tan. I'm revisiting the base and giving this a quick wash of Agrax Earthshade. And this just helps create a uniform feeling over the whole base and kind of brings all those colors together. While I'm at it, I'm switching over to Buck and I'm starting to do the same thing on him. I'm picking out those key details. He's in much more of a silvery grayscale kind of color scheme, so I'm using a neutral gray just to start picking out some of those armor sections. He also has some urban camo patterned thighs, so I'm starting that same approach that I did on Dare, but this time around I'm just using a grayscale. I've mixed in just a small amount of white and I'm starting to build up my quick grayscale. And again, this is the same approach I did on the previous armor sections, just adding more of these blobs. The more I add, the more layers, the more convincing of a camo pattern it becomes. I'm adding some highlights to these armored sections on the biceps. I believe these are a shiny metal in the game, so you could use a metallic paint, but I just wanted to tackle these in a non-metallic approach. I'm using some pure white just to grab that small UNSC badge that's kind of tucked under his arm here. For his visor, I'm using Cobalt metal. This is a blue metallic paint and it's perfect for that ODST visor. Buck has a single stripe running down the middle of his helmet, and so I'm using some of the grey that I've mixed on my palette here just to kind of pencil in where that stripe is going to be. And then once I'm happy with that, I just thicken the line by going over it just a few more times. I'm adding some small surface scratches with some dark grey that I've mixed up. And this just helps to sell the idea that this is a weathered paint on top of a armoured section. Just to finish out the base, I introduced some white into that Sons of Horus green, and I'm just gently scratching over the surface with an old brush. It's not quite dry brushing, this is just very little pressure just to help kind of sell the idea that these are surface scratches. For the dirt sections, I went back to that Balor brown and just gently dabbed on some of these highlights. Really just letting the sculpt kind of dictate where the paint lays. I'm finally adding some burnt umber pigment, and this helps to kind of tie the base into the miniature. So I'm just dusting this on again with an old brush. And this helps to sell the idea that this is a really dusty location. I'm gluing on some small 2mm tufts. And this really helps to add some extra interest to the model. I've decided to revisit Buck's assault rifle and just tie it in more in line with how it looks in the game. So I've gone back with some of that grayscale that I've got on my palette, starting with that neutral grey, and I'm highlighting certain sections of the rifle just to kind of help break up that black colour. For the ammo counter on the back of the sight here, I just mixed up a blue using some of the blues from Dare's colour palette. And then I just gave this whole thing a black wash over the top. And these drop troopers are ready for combat. This was a really fun, quick and easy paint job. Honestly, I think I spent more time waiting for things to dry than I did painting, but I really wanted to lay down that initial recipe ready for the rest of the box. There's some great looking models for the rest of the expansion, but these two hero models were really where I wanted to add some focus and attention. As always, I would love to know what you think down in the comments below. Have you picked up this expansion pack? Or would you like me to paint more Halo Flashpoint? This is kind of my first toe in the water with this brand new game. So let me know down in the comments below. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I do painting tutorials every week. Like the video, comment, all that stuff helps the YouTube algorithm. A big thank you to my YouTube members, and also my Patreon is up and running where I feature more painting tutorials like this one. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one.